Hi, I'm reading through the book Why the Church of the Nazarene Should Be Fully LGBTQ plus Affirming. Today we are going to let the author of this chapter, chapter 48, The Scales Fell Off, Sheila Mee, talk in her own voice. So take it away, Sheila.
My name is Sheila Mee. Today I would like to share with you an essay written and appearing in the book Why the Church of the Nazarene Should Be Fully LGBTQ Affirming, which this was edited by Thomas Ord and Alexa Ord. The chapter that I want to share with you is one that I actually wrote. It's called The Scales Fell Off. It is my story of how I got to be the way that I am today in regard to the theme that we're talking about. I was a missionary for many, many years in the Church of the Nazarene, and I will refer to that. One of the things that I've definitely learned is that however people identify themselves, the most important thing that I can do is love them. I was a missionary. One of my missionary friends once joked that in the Church of the Nazarene, even God wants to be one. She was referring to the place of honor that we held within the denomination. I had served in 5 countries in Latin America for more than 20 years, and 3 of these were war-torn. I think that we received homage from those in the United States for staying in such places, though indeed it was an honor and a privilege to do so. On furlough every 5th year, I worked on a Master of Divinity degree at Nazarene Theological Seminary. This took 3 furloughs, and the knowledge that I gained enhanced my ministry greatly and was life-changing in many ways. During the last year of my studies, I did an internship as a chaplain in a large hospital there in Kansas City, where I was studying. There was a referral to an older gentleman, Dean, who was scheduled for a heart procedure. When I walked into his room, he was lying in the bed. Gary, a younger man, hovered beside him. When I introduced myself, Gary immediately exclaimed, "Oh, we are so glad to see you. Our pastor's out of town and we wanted so much to have someone pray with us. Dean's having heart surgery. We know God is in control. We were both born again several years before we met and have trusted God completely. But frankly, we're scared." Gary's anxiety and worry were apparent in both his speech and his demeanor. Dean, lying quietly, looked exhausted and concerned. Clearly, they needed support, and obviously for privacy reasons, I am using names that are fictitious for these 2 gentlemen. As Gary talked and I observed their body language toward one another, it became quite apparent that they were a couple. They were obviously devoted to each other and talked about a relationship with God in language with which I was very comfortable. Simply put, they were using my God language. I was very conscious that they were in need of pastoral support. I was also aware of experiencing strange internal upheaval that I later was able to identify as cognitive dissonance. My mind was telling me all the things that I'd been taught, especially in the church. Homosexuality is sin. These 2 men could not possibly be Christians. Meanwhile, my heart was saying, these are good men who are very sincere in their faith. And my body was responding viscerally. Rapid heartbeat, a churning in my stomach. As a heterosexual woman, it felt impossible to understand them. And frankly, spiritually, I felt beyond confused. I was saved in the Church of the Nazarene at 14 and experienced entire sanctification a couple of years later. A graduate of Southern Nazarene University, I was now soon to graduate from Nazarene Theological Seminary. I had thorough theological training, and as a devoted Nazarene missionary, I taught theology to pastors in training throughout Latin America. How was it possible that a gay couple was testifying to being born again and expressing a deep dependence upon God? This could not be. In spite of my internal upheaval, my responsibility was to provide pastoral support. I had prayer with them. They were grateful and appreciative. When I followed up the next day, I learned the procedure has gone well, and they were praising God. Following both of these encounters, I did a lot of processing with my chaplaincy supervisor. I'd been thrown into what felt like an outlandish, impossible world that I had never experienced. It was traumatic, emotionally and spiritually. To my knowledge, I had never consciously known a gay person, let alone a gay person who claimed to be Christian. Because studies show that about around 10% of the world population is gay, it's highly unlikely that I really had never known a gay person. With deep reflection, I was able to identify several individuals that I'd known during my lifetime who were very probably homosexual, though not openly so. At this point in time, I had no idea how queerness would affect me and my family. All I knew was it was something within me was shifting. Today, as I reflect on my experience, I have a deep sense of gratitude to Dean and Gary and to God for leading me to them and them to me. It began an awakening within me. The scales over my eyes were softening and loosening. I was beginning to see that all people are created in the divine image, not just the ones who are like me. It opened me to the possibility of recognizing that all are loved by God. None are inferior or malformed or deficient. Over the next several months, I encountered gay people wherever I went. I was aware of co-workers and patients and others who were gay. I found myself observing, wondering, and struggling with what I was discovering. The cognitive dissonance did not just disappear. Instead, it lessened more and more, little by little, as I began to connect with others. I also began pondering the innate differences that are present in all humans. Some are born with blonde hair, others with black or red or brown, some straight, some curly. One man might be a gifted musician, another an excellent auto mechanic. Some children are petite and slender, while others are stocky and sturdy. One woman is extroverted and outgoing. Another is quiet and introverted. One innate difference that struck me was handedness. There are 5 children in my family of origin. All of them are right-handed except me. I was born left-handed like my mother. When she went to school, she was forced to write with her right hand. She was punished when she did not. All of her life, she had almost illegible handwriting, but diligently used her right hand. She did everything else with her left hand. When I went to school, I was allowed to use my left hand, but had to turn my paper in the same direction as the right-handed kids. This forced my hand into an awkward position, so to this day, it looks like I'm writing upside down, and others in my generation do the same thing. I learned that in ancient times, left-handedness was considered evil and unclean. Early Catholicism said left-handed people were of the devil. In some countries, it was actually declared illegal. At the very least, people considered it to be abnormal and inferior. Fortunately, today, handedness is not the issue that it once was, at least in the United States. My youngest grandson is showing signs of being left-handed, and no one views this as odd or wrong. I was one of the estimated 10% of the population that was born left-handed. I began to ponder whether it's possible that some people are born gay or transgender, or some of the other gender variations. If that is the case, how could I condemn them any more than I could condemn myself or others for being born left-handed? As it was wrong to force my mother to unnaturally use her right hand and thus hinder her throughout her life, was it wrong for me to insist that other humans have the same gender expression and sexual orientation that I do? A case in point is a young man that I know well. He appeared to be a girl when he was born, and his mother started raising him as such. As a toddler, before he had words, he would point to the clothes he wanted to wear, always the boyish ones. When he was old enough to help shop, he wanted to buy everything in the boys' section. He played only with what many would consider to be masculine toys. He was homeschooled in the first 2 grades, but when he went to 3rd grade and the kids would line up at recess, he always got in the boys' line. He wore a hoodie all the time and kept it pulled up over his head to hide his hair. And he appeared to be sad much of the time. When he was 15, he finally came out. He was a transgender male. His mother was not surprised. I was not surprised. He immediately was embraced and lovingly supported. He got counseling and medical assistance as he needed and began transitioning. Now, 7 years later, he is who he was born to be. a bright, happy, growing young man. About 40% of the young people like him who do not have familial support end up committing suicide. I would have been brokenhearted if this young man, incidentally my grandson, had become part of that horrific statistic. Not surprisingly, the change in me, along with other changes I was experiencing, led me to explore whether I could in good conscience remain within the Church of the Nazarene. I no longer believed it was right to expect someone to change to become what someone else wants them to be. I could no longer buy into the concept, love the sinner but hate the sin. Real love is about embracing people as they are, created in the divine image. I know I could certainly not continue to serve as a missionary, teaching and preaching concepts that I could no longer embrace. The scales had fallen off of my eyes, and I could not put them back on. Ultimately, I became part of a congregation that is affirming of all people. I felt grief that I could not remain in a church that had nurtured, sustained, and provided a place of service for me for so many years. And it breaks my heart to recognize that had I been born a lesbian or transgender woman, I would never have gotten that amazing love and support. Some years later, my youngest daughter was finally able to embrace who she is, recognizing her sexual identity as a lesbian. I am eternally grateful that I was in a place in my own spirituality where there was no question about acceptance and support. She knew that and told me without fear. She needed me to be on her side, and she knew that I was. I saw her transformed from a young woman who was becoming more and more silent and withdrawn into one who has blossomed and grown into the fullness of who she was born to be. It was an amazing experience. She and her partner and later wife tried for several years to remain within the Church of the Nazarene. Their pastor did all he could to be supportive within the constraints of the church. Ultimately, they too had to leave. As I conclude this portion of my story, I want to say the alternative to not loving and accepting those with gender identities different than our own is death. For some, it's a literal death. The suicide rates are astronomical in the LGBTQ plus community. Sometimes it is the death of relationship with the church that has been deeply wounding and rejecting. Sometimes it is the death of human relationships. I have seen families split apart because one sibling cannot accept her lesbian sister, or because parents refuse to allow their son into the house because he's gay. Fortunately, for many, it is not a death of a relationship with the divine. Today, I have good friends in every sexual orientation. People like me who live and love and want the same things out of life that I do. I've learned that however people identify themselves, the most important thing that I can do is love them. Love means accepting who they are. I have learned that deep spirituality, whether in Christianity or in other forms, has nothing to do with sexual orientation. I am deeply grateful to Gary and Dean, who started me on this journey. I'm also grateful to the amazing LGBTQ plus friends I've made across the years who've deeply enriched my life. Loving acceptance truly pays off. Thank you.
Sheila Mee, thank you so much. I realized that you are the mom of Kara Jo in chapter 2, so seeing those connections is kind of cool too. It's a simple story, but it's cool to see how typical people or extraordinary people, you fancy missionary super Christian person, can come to remove the scales or have them removed, or can humble themselves and see God in other people, or at least love from God's perspective of other people, even the people you didn't think could be a part of God's story. So it's humbling to see that, and it is good to see that example. So thank you so much for your story. I appreciate it.